The battlefield needs blood and guts, not ink and paper. Sergeant Rex Thorne's voice boomed. He mocked Private Alara Vance in front of the whole tavern, then ripped her sleeve to humiliate her. But then 4 mercenaries burst in. What they didn't know? The quiet woman they ignored wasn't just the daughter of a legend, but was also the only one smart enough to save all of them. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, this story is for you. A humid late summer haze clung to the streets of Jacksonville, North Carolina, a town whose heartbeat pulsed in time with the nearby cadence of Camp Lejeune. The air, thick with the scent of pine and distant salt marshes, felt heavy, promising a thunderstorm that never quite arrived. It was in this charged atmosphere that Marines sought refuge in places like the Salty Dog, a tavern where the dark wood was stained with spilled beer, and the walls were covered in the faded flags of units long since deployed or disbanded. The soul of the tavern, at least on this particular evening, was Sergeant Rex Thorne, built like a battering ram, with a thick neck and a jaw that seemed permanently set in a scowl of superiority. Rex was a man who believed the Marine Corps was forged in crucible of physical dominance. His voice, a gravelly boom, easily cut through the din. He was flanked by his 2 acolytes, Corporal Cutter Jones, a wiry Marine with sharp, restless eyes and a tongue to match, and Corporal Rhino Miller, a mountain of muscle who communicated mostly through grunts of agreement. They were a trinity of brute force, celebrating their latest field exercise with the boisterous arrogance of men who believed they were invincible. "It's about pushing past the pain, that's all," Rex declared, slamming his mug on the table. "You feel the burn, you embrace it. You bleed, you ignore it. That's how you win wars." His sermon was interrupted when his gaze fell upon a lone figure in a corner booth, Private First Class Alara Vance. At 24, she was striking, with pale skin that contrasted sharply with her jet-black hair, pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun. Her Marine Corps combat utility uniform, the digital desert Marpat camouflage, was perfectly pressed, a stark difference to the slightly disheveled state of the men around her. She sat with a ramrod-straight posture, her sharp blue eyes focused intently on a small, well-worn book. She wasn't drinking beer. A single glass of water sat untouched before her. To Rex, she was an anomaly, a disruption to his neatly ordered world of masculine strength. "Theory won't save you on the battlefield, Vance." Rex's voice sliced across the room. He made no effort to lower it. This was a performance. "It requires blood and guts, not ink and paper." Ilara looked up, her expression unreadable. "Thorough preparation minimizes the need for bloodshed, Sergeant." Her voice was calm, measured, each word chosen with precision. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet confidence that seemed to infuriate Rex more than any open defiance. "Preparation?" Rex scoffed, pushing back from his table and striding towards her, his followers trailing behind him like pilot fish. "My generation built this Corps on strength. Yours is turning it into a book club. People like you weaken our legacy." In the darkest corner of the bar, a man sat observing, unnoticed by the loud sergeants. Master Sergeant Marcus Gunny Thorne was a relic from another era. In his late 40s, his face was a roadmap of hard-earned wrinkles, his eyes holding the weary wisdom of a man who had seen too many wars. His own uniform was faded from years of service, a silent testament to a career spent in harm's way. He wasn't here for the camaraderie, he was here to finish a 10-year-old promise. A quiet man in a civilian jacket, with the haunted look of a retired journalist, slipped past his table, leaving a new coaster. Gunny covered it with his hand, feeling the slight indentation. The meeting was over. Under the dim light of his keychain, a single UV beam revealed the invisible ink, General Franklin Pierce, Warehouse 6, Port of Baltimore, the final piece. The name of the man who had sold out his unit. The name of the man who had gotten Lex Vance killed. Meanwhile, Alara stared at the pages in front of her, but the words blurred. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from a day long ago, just before his final deployment. "Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not strong enough, Alara. Real strength is up here," he'd said, tapping his temple gently. Her application to the Force Reconnaissance Training Program wasn't just ambition. It was a pact she'd made with a ghost. It was a promise to live by his code, not by the narrow definitions of men like Rex Thorne. The confrontation brewing wasn't just a personal slight. It was a battle between her father's legacy and the world's prejudice. "Stand up," Rex commanded, his patience completely gone. He reached for Alara, his hand closing around her upper arm. His intent was to haul her to her feet, a simple display of physical dominance. But he was unprepared for her response. It wasn't resistance, it was redirection. With a subtle shift of her weight and a precise turn of her elbow, a textbook move from the Marine Corps martial arts program, she used his own momentum against him, causing him to stumble forward. Enraged by the public embarrassment, Rex yanked back with raw force. The fabric of her utility blouse, strong as it was, couldn't withstand the violent tug. A sharp, ripping sound echoed in the sudden quiet of the tavern as the sleeve tore open from the shoulder seam down to her bicep. The familiar eagle, globe, and anchor was revealed, etched in stark black ink. But it was the inscription beneath it that silenced the room. In elegant memorial script, it read, "Sergeant Major Alexander Lex Vance, Semper Fi." A collective gasp went through the few Marines who recognized the name. Rex froze, his hand still holding the torn fabric. The name Lex Vance was legendary, a ghost story told to recruits about impossible heroism. He stared from the tattoo to her face, his mind refusing to connect the dots. But across the room, Gunny Thorne's reaction was far more violent. He shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward onto the floor. His face, usually a mask of hardened calm, was drained of all color. It wasn't surprise in his eyes. It was a profound, soul-deep horror, as if he had just seen a ghost from a nightmare he'd been trying to escape for a decade. The lie he had carried for 10 years was now standing before him, embodied in the daughter of the man he couldn't save. Crack! The tavern door flew open, splintering off its hinges. 4 men flooded the room, moving with a fluid, terrifying precision. They wore black tactical gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas, and they carried short-barreled rifles with suppressors that made them seem all the more menacing. They were not robbers, they were hunters. Their leader stepped forward, pulling off his balaclava to reveal a man whose face was a collection of hard lines and cold calculation. This was Silas. He was in his late 30s, with pale, watchful eyes that seemed to miss nothing. A thin white scar ran diagonally across his lips, giving his face a permanent, cruel smirk. He surveyed the room with the detached air of a professional assessing a job site. "Marcus Thorne." Silas's voice was devoid of emotion, a flat, chilling statement of fact. "General Pierce sends his regards." For Rex Thorne, the world tilted on its axis. In the span of 30 seconds, his entire reality had been dismantled. The quiet, bookish private was the daughter of a near-mythical hero, and his uncle, the bedrock of his world, the man he considered the epitome of a Marine, was the target of a professional hit squad. He looked from the cold, professional barrels of the rifles to his own clenched fists. The power he had worshipped, the physical strength he had used as a measure for all men, was utterly useless. He and his men, the self-proclaimed wolves of the base, were now nothing more than trapped sheep. The arrogance that had defined him moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar dread. He saw the genuine threat in Silas's eyes and understood, with sickening clarity, that some battles could never be won with muscle alone. This was the beginning of his disillusionment. "You have 10 seconds to hand over the intel," Silas said, his voice a low threat. To emphasize his point, he grabbed the bartender, a stout, middle-aged man named Sal, with a weary face and the steady hands of a former Navy corpsman, and pressed the barrel of his rifle to the man's temple. Gunny Thorne knew he was trapped. He opened his mouth to speak, to sacrifice the information to save a life, but before any sound could escape, the world plunged into absolute blackness. The humming bar signs, the overhead lights, the glowing beer taps, all extinguished in an instant. A collective scream of panic erupted from the patrons. Alara had made her move. In the disorienting darkness, the tavern transformed into a tactical chessboard, and Alara was the player. She moved with a silent, ghostly purpose. "Get under the tables!" "Stay low," she whispered urgently to the terrified civilians, her voice a beacon of calm in the chaos. As she moved, she shoved heavy oak tables on their sides, creating makeshift barricades, altering the layout of the room, and disrupting the mercenaries' lines of fire. "Night vision on!" Silas bellowed, his voice tight with fury. "Find him!" 3 pairs of green glowing goggles flickered to life, casting an eerie, predatory light across the room. But this was exactly what Alara had anticipated. She saw the glint of spilled whiskey on the floor near the bar. A puddle formed when Sal had dropped a bottle in the initial shock. She found Rex crouched near the wall. "Sergeant, your lighter," she hissed, her voice barely audible. "The spill! When I give the signal." Rex, acting on pure instinct and a newfound desperate trust, pulled the worn Zippo from his pocket, the familiar click of it opening a small sound in the tense silence. From across the room, Sal, understanding the unspoken plan, kicked another bottle of high-proof spirits off the bar, spreading the flammable liquid. "Now!" Ilara yelled. Rex flicked the flint. A tiny spark bloomed into a sudden, blinding sheet of blue and orange flame that roared across the floorboards. For the mercenaries, looking through light-amplifying goggles, the flash was catastrophic. It was like staring directly into the sun. They screamed, clawing at their faces, temporarily and totally blind. It was the opening they needed. In those few precious seconds of agony and confusion, Gunny and Rex moved as one. They were a blur of disciplined violence, taking down the 2 blinded mercenaries with brutal efficiency. But victory was costly. The 3rd mercenary, shielded from the initial blast, recovered his senses and fired a wild burst from his rifle. A sharp cry of pain cut through the air. "Rhino's hit!" Cutter yelled from the darkness. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of motion. Rex scrambled toward his friend, but Alara was already there. She had slid across the floor, her torn sleeve a forgotten detail. "Pressure on the wound!" "Now!" she commanded, her voice cutting through Cutter's panic. She ripped a clean bar towel from the counter and, with practiced expertise, fashioned a makeshift tourniquet high on Rhino's thigh, her hands moving with a surgeon's precision in the dim, flickering light of the dying flames. Rex watched, momentarily frozen. He saw her tactical brilliance, her utter calm under fire, and now her life-saving competence. The respect that had been reluctantly forming in his mind solidified into something deeper, awe. This wasn't the strength of a legend's daughter. This was the strength of a Marine. Only Silas remained. With the practiced ease of a predator, he grabbed Gunny, yanking him up as a human shield and pressing his rifle to the old Marine's head. "Stop! Or he dies!" he snarled, his eyes darting between the shadows. "It's over, Silas," Gunny grunted, his voice strained but defiant. A cruel smile, highlighted by the scar, twisted Silas's lips as he looked past Gunny to where Alara was crouched. "Your father said something similar," he taunted, his words sharp as shrapnel. "He died trying to be a hero." General Pierce ordered his own men to neutralize him in the chaos. He died because he was naive. The words were meant to break her, a final psychological blow. But instead of shattering, Ilara's resolve hardened into something crystalline and sharp. Her gaze flickered past Silas to a large, ornate mirror hanging on the far wall, a relic from the tavern's more glamorous past. In its reflection, she saw Rex, silently and carefully maneuvering into a flanking position. Their eyes met in the glass, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "My father died for honor," Ilara said, her voice ringing with cold fury. "That's a concept a mercenary like you could never comprehend." With a defiant yell, she lunged forward, not at Silas, but to the side, drawing his attention and the barrel of his rifle. It was a feint, a calculated risk. As Silas instinctively tracked her movement, Rex exploded from the shadows. The collision was brutal and decisive. Rex, channeling all his shame and newfound respect into a single, focused act of violence, slammed Silas into the bar, disarming him in one powerful motion. The fight was over. The aftermath was a blur of flashing blue and red lights. As the local police secured the scene, a team of quiet, professional men in dark suits arrived, led by an NCIS agent. The data on a tactical device recovered from Silas's gear, combined with Gunny's testimony, was all they needed. The fallout was swift and merciless. General Franklin Pierce was arrested in his Pentagon office. Tried for treason, murder, and conspiracy, the decorated general was stripped of his rank and sentenced by a military tribunal to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth. Silas and his surviving mercenary faced federal charges. Convicted of domestic terrorism and multiple counts of attempted murder, they were sentenced to consecutive life sentences at ADX Florence, the most secure supermax prison in the country. The investigation into Operation Nightingale exposed a deep-seated network of corruption. Over 24 military officers and defense contractors were indicted, receiving sentences ranging from 15 years to life in federal prison. At a solemn ceremony weeks later, Sergeant Major Alexander Lex Vance's record was officially amended. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for his true final act, sacrificing himself to expose a betrayal at the highest levels. Ilara stood before his headstone at Arlington, Gunny on one side, Rex on the other. Rex, now quieter and more thoughtful, placed his unit's challenge coin on the marble. "He would be proud of you, Ilara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And thank you for showing me what real strength is." Ilara nodded, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. She had reclaimed her father's honor, and, in doing so, had forged her own. The battle in the tavern was over, but her journey as a Marine had just truly begun. The story of Ilara Vance reminds us that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't loud, flashy events, but the quiet unfolding of courage that God places within each of us. In our darkest moments, when we feel cornered and underestimated, we often discover a strength we never knew we possessed. It's the miracle of the human spirit, resilient and divinely inspired, that allows an ordinary person to do extraordinary things. In your own life, you may not face armed mercenaries in a tavern, but you face your own battles every single day. You might feel overlooked at your job, misunderstood by your family, or silenced by the world. Remember this story. Remember that the quietest person in the room often has the strongest heart and the sharpest mind. The true measure of a person is not the noise they make, but the integrity they show when tested. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner strength. Let us know in the comments below about a time you were underestimated but proved everyone wrong. Your stories build a community of faith and courage. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales that inspire and uplift the spirit. May God bless you and your families, and may He keep you safe in all your endeavors.